Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Uh, I'm going to be a host for today. This is Manu from Appetency Recruitment Services. Uh, we guys have got a host today, or our guest today, Clinton. Uh, and today we guys will be talking about ISO and what it could mean as the benefits for MSPs. Uh, we at Appetency Recruitment Services specialize in working with MSPs, software firms, and and SMBs. And that's the reason why we guys have requested Clinton to share his knowledge about ISOs and what it could mean for MSPs in today's dynamic and so fast evolving MSP space that is at this moment. And a lot of our clients talk about their challenges about how they can build a good team, how they can build more trust with their own customers, how they can justify uh, as a competitive advantage that they can offer to their customers. And hopefully, Clinton can help us understand how ISO can be one of those tools that can help MSPs address these challenges in today's dynamic area or today's dynamic space. So, um, Clinton is the director of GRC for MSPs. He has got nearly 2 decades of experience in the MSP space and has implemented. He was part of the leadership team and head of technology for Melbourne-based MSP and has taken the journey of implementing ISO at his MSP as well. So couldn't be a better person who can help us understand and help us understand what ISO could mean for the MSP space. So welcome, Clinton. And I'll pass on the baton to you if I haven't done a good job in explaining what you have done. Please.
No, you've done a great
pick it
job
up.
there. Thanks, Mano. Yes, as Mano mentioned, I'm the director of GRC for MSPs. A little bit about my background. As mentioned, I did about 18 years in an MSP in the Melbourne region, starting off on the help desk like most people do, working my way up to system administration, ending up at the on the leadership team as the head of technology. And while I was in that position, the business decided to look at the ISO certification. There was a few contracts coming up where it could help, and just looking forward a bit into the future, it seemed like compliance was something that was going to be pretty important to MSPs. So we had a look into that. So I was, put in charge of implementing, maintaining, and getting that certification, which was great. Since then, I've exited the MSP there, but I went and got some formal training. I'm an ISO certified lead implementer and auditor, along with a few other Microsoft security certifications I got when I was working within the MSP. And these days, I'm really about trying to spread and help knowledge within the MSP community. It's very hard to get into something like ISO with the busyness and day-to-day runnings of an MSP. I know what it's like. I know the challenges. I know the constraints. So what I'm trying to do is just help MSPs uplift their information security there and help them get certified before it becomes mandatory in some way.
That's perfect. Well, it's pretty interesting that you speak about how ISO could be becoming mandatory for MSPs. That's pretty interesting. Let's start with the basics, if it's okay, Clinton. Let's start with. Can you tell us a bit more about what is ISO certifications? I mean, how is it relevant in current MSP land space, and and how does ISO certificate mm, mean for MSPs and protect their business in the future? Because obviously it's such a dynamic space at this moment.
Yeah, definitely. So the ISO certification itself, the 27701 specifically, there's a whole lot of ISO standards. There's tens of thousands for all different industries and different things like that. But the specifically the 27701 is an information security management system. So it focuses on managing your information security. It's about protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. They call it the CIA triad. It's not the government over in the US. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And it puts in a framework. It's all risk-based, and it's very customizable to the business. If you read the standard, it's very vague on what it wants you to do. It says meet these things, but it doesn't tell you how to do it, because what it's designed to do is to actually integrate into your current business, not change your business. So you don't want to be doing massive uplifts and changes of processes and things like that. Generally, you can just tweak and manipulate them to fit what is required within the standard a lot of the time. So it's a certifiable standard. There's a lot of things out there, the essential aids, CIS, NIST, and those kind of things. They're not actually certifiable by a certification body. And this is an international standard that applies to all businesses. As this is not MSP specific, it's not IT specific. Any business can become ISO certified, from one person to Fortune 500, whatever you want to do in between there. It's designed to be very flexible in that kind of way. The landscape of the MSPs, what we're finding is data breaches, supply chain attacks, and things like that, right? We had an issue a couple of years ago with Kaseya, where there was a breach through the RMM. There was a SolarWinds attack and a few other things like that. What MSPs hold is basically the keys to all their clients' kingdom, right? Yeah. You've got the admin passwords, you've got the access. So with cyber insurance questionnaires coming up and clients becoming a bit more diligent around data protection with all the news around breaches and spotlight on it, you're going to become a highlight of that, right? You're probably their most high risk vendor if a client looks at their list, just due to the access and things that you do for them. So it becomes hard to prove that you're taking information security seriously. And how do you prove that? You can say, hey, we're the best IT, MSP, security company, MSSP, whatever you want to call it these days. But how do you prove that? You can just say that. The ISO certification helps by it being so recognizable. It's an international standard, and you have to get externally audited regularly. Every year you need to get re-audited. So it helps keep that proof that you're maintaining the system. A big part of the ISO framework is around continuous improvement. So you have to be continuously improving, and there's a lot of mechanism checks and audits and stuff you do throughout the process to make sure that you're catching any deficiencies in your system. You're documenting them, you're doing a risk assessment against them, and then you're mitigating them as well. And as for protecting the future, again, I think at some point they're going to put a big spotlight on MSPs, and there's going to be some. I don't think ISO will become mandatory. I don't think that will be the case. There'll be some sort of regulation I feel will have to come in. You look at lawyers and accountants. You've got to pass certain certifications to become those kind of professionals, right? Like you got to get your CPA if you're an accountant. There's the lawyers of the bar or whatever it is for the lawyers. But there's nothing. Some guy can finish high school and start an IT MSP if they want to, and how do clients trust that? They might be really good at it, but how do they show that and prove that to their customers? And something like ISO is a good way to do it. It's not the only way. There's lots of other ways to do it, but I feel like it's a pretty good way just because of the certification you kind of get at the end and the way the framework works to help you continuously improve.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So what is the ISO certification process is? What is the ISO certification process? And Clinton, obviously a lot of MSPs has got tools already in place to talk about, how they do information security and data protections and stuff. How's that ISO gonna help a bit different than we help or complement that kind of a tool set? I mean, just from the process perspective, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So firstly, the certification process,
Yeah.
a lot of the time it starts off with, it's a commitment, right? It's an investment that you're doing here. It's not a small little tick box exercise generally that you can do. It affects the entire business. It's not just a management thing that changes. It's not just a technical thing that changes. It is a business changing process. So you usually need to get some kind of buy-in and commitment from managers or from executives or from leaders to make sure it's something you want to achieve. And a lot of that comes from, a contractual requirement. A customer's come to them and said, hey, we want you to be ISO certified, or we think we might need you to be soon. It could be that you want to go for different tenders or contracts where for customers that might require a higher level of information security. It could be to, get that competitive advantage. So other MSPs in the area or in your region that you're competing with, maybe they don't have that certification. This is a step up you want to do, or you want to get ahead of the game. And before something comes in that you need to do, you get ahead of it and look at the ISO certification now, because it is not a short process. Generally, this takes 6 to 12 months if you're committing the right amount of resources. The absolute minimum you could ever do is about 3 months, because they need to see the system running for a period of time before they can audit against it and do it. And that's 3 months. But generally, 12 is around what you see. Just because MSPs are time poor, right? Like we don't have all this spare time to go and run off and write all these policies and implement them and communicate them and do that. You've got to do it a bit slower. So once you get that buy-in, generally the best thing to do is a gap analysis first. We have someone come in and they say, well, what have you got in place now? Because a lot of businesses have something in place. Like successful MSPs have processes and procedures and things they're following. You just compare that against the ISO standard. A lot of the time you might find you need to dot the I's, cross the T's, and you can align it. Sometimes it's informal and you just need to write it into a policy. So getting an idea of where you're at helps work out kind of what investment and time and resources you're going to need to put in to try and get to that level of being certifiable. So once you've got that gap analysis, generally like you get a good plan out of that of what you need to do. Things like writing policies and processes and setting up the standard meetings, doing risk assessments. And once you kind of got the requirements met within that, you go for what's called the stage 1 audit. So when you first get certified, you have to go through two audits. The first stage 1 is purely a documentation kind of review. They go through all your policies and procedures you've written, and they'll come back and say, it looks like you're ready to go for certification. And they'll put in a recommendation to say, look, all your documentation looks great. We want to recommend you for the stage 2 audit, which is the one, if you pass, you get the actual certificate. The difference between the stage 1 and 2, stage 1 is documentation based. Stage 2 is they actually check all your controls and they go in a bit deeper. They do things like they might come on site and view your premise and do the physical security and walk around. A lot of the times these days, since kind of COVID, it's been remote. So they'll ask you to screen share, and you'll have to show your antivirus status. You'll have to show your policies and procedures. You'll have to show tickets where security incidents come in. So they want to actually see evidence of the things you're saying you're doing in there. And the audit process is generally, depending, they've got a formula they use, the certification bodies, on how long it takes and how much it costs. But generally, it's about 3 to 4 days for, 20 to 50 seat MSP or something like that. Once you've got the stage 2 and you pass and, you've got your information security management system in place, you get a certificate. They will write on there, you come up with a scope that will be written on that certificate around what's covered. Because the other big thing about the standard is it's customizable around what you include in it. Generally, it's not the best bet to go starting with going, the whole business is included. Well, that's a lot of work, right? You also don't want to go too light where you say, well, I've certified my stationary cupboard, and no customers or people will care that you've got that certified. So, a lot of the times with MSPs, what I see is generally starting around the help desk services, because that is the most common service that customers want to see that you're managing correctly. So you can exclude things like professional services, your marketing team. There may be little tie-ins where they use the same systems where you need to do a little bit of controls on them, but they won't be necessarily strictly audited in the audit. So once you've got that certificate, it goes into a cadence of 2 years of surveillance audits where they do like a mini audit each year. So each 12 months, you've got those surveillance audits. Then the third year, you've got to do another full audit. So it will be like the stage 1 and 2 together. And then you have to keep maintaining that every year to keep it going. So,
well, that sounds pretty intense. But obviously, when you're talking about so much effort, Clinton, it's obviously time consuming. But tell me, how would this framework help in protecting the revenue streams and create revenue streams? Because all this effort needs to create more revenue to support this activity as well. So how does it help in supporting and creating more revenue?
Well, firstly, it's very risk-based, right? A lot of MSPs don't sit down and address their own risks within their business. So the framework being heavily based on that, it can help find holes and potential issues, or even incidents that cost the MSP money that might be happening regularly, that might be on the horizon of happening, which could be business closing in some aspects. If you've left some holes open and they get exploited, you might come in one day and you don't have a business anymore. That's the extreme side of things. But it's also going to help you with maintaining customers. If customers are looking around at, other IT options or something like that, if you're holding a certification, that just gives you that little bit of extra shine on top of a lot of the other competitors around you. So it helps with you justifying increased costs and things like that, because the customer is going to care that their information's been protected. Because if their data gets leaked through you, then they're just in a bad position, just like you are, right? They can sue you and try and recoup money off you all they want, but the reputational damage is generally very hard to get through and to come back from. So you're doing that. You can also open up new revenue streams by going through this process. So by learning what's in the standard and even what's required in it, you can start to align your own services to look at, helping customers through that journey as well, because there is a bit of IT work in it, right? And you're their IT supplier, so you're going to need to help or be across what's going on there. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things you could really do that can protect your revenue streams. It can help attract higher talent into your business and things like that. Yeah, it's very valuable when you put it to the test.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Actually, you mentioned that and as a certificate can help you differentiate from other MSPs, and it can help you um, justify the increase in the pricing that you're charging the customer. That's very interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how it can help differentiate an MSP and become a trusted partner for your clients? Because as an MSP, trust is everything. They've got the entire IT running based on MSPs.
Yeah. So the thing is here, how do you prove trust? How do you get trust? A lot of the time, that's by doing what you say, right, or some kind of evidence or proof. Just saying, "Hey, trust me," that usually doesn't work. The fact that you've had a third party come in and see behind your curtains, it's a very vulnerable thing, right? Like, you're letting an auditor in, you're showing them your processes and procedures behind the scenes, and they will check by looking for evidence that you're actually doing it. It's not just a paper review of what you're doing. You actually need to show it. So, that can help with that. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. What was the question again? Sorry.
You spoke about how can ISO help in differentiating an MSP and building trust with the clients?
Yes.
Yeah.
Trust. Yeah. So you've got the external audit that kind of comes in. And I think we're talking about the revenue increase as well, the price increase, now that I remember. So if you're protecting the data, there's obviously increased costs on your end to maintain that. And if you're talking to your customers in the right way, talking about cybersecurity all the time, you're going to be able to charge more because they're going to know their data is protected with you. If they go out with some backyard MSP that's, just doing the bare minimum, using all the standard tools, not looking at their own processes and doing things like that, there's a high chance that customer could get, a supply chain attack. So not them directly breached all the time, the supplier could. So if they're starting to care about that, they're going to look for, trust and evidence that you're doing that. The other thing is, if a lot of these customers are going for cyber insurance, there's a few questions usually on those these days around suppliers and risks and things like that. So that can also open up those kind of questions, because they're going to pay higher premiums if they're not going to be able to show that their suppliers are secure and things like that. So that's the kind of way you can help justify it. They get cheap premiums sometimes, but it's the level of the cost of a breach. And it also shows the maturity of the business. The fact that you've invested and gone through this process helps make the MSP work like a well-oiled machine, because there's a light shining on a lot of the core processes. So they're going to get better support generally. If your business is running smoother, the smoother the support is that you can deliver to those customers at a higher level. Less interruptions. You're not going to have as much interruptions and downtime, hopefully, if you're putting a lot of this in place, because you're reviewing and checking and improving it constantly. So that means the customers are going to be able to get onto you more available. You're going to be more available to your customers and things like that. So.
Fair enough. And you don't have to start the entire company doesn't need to be ISO certified. You could have a division that is ISO certified. Yeah.
So there's a difference between what's on your, like what you scope in your certificate, what gets audited. Generally, what I say is apply it to the entire business, but scrutinize the things in scope, right? You don't want to have too many cowboys out on the side doing nothing, not caring about information and security. But what you find a lot of the time is, 365 tenant, right? You've got your email and SharePoint in there. The whole business uses that. You can't just say,
Right.
This part of the business that's certified is using that platform. Anyone who touches that platform needs to have a level of compliance and controls across them. They won't be audited directly, but you need to ensure that data in there. The information security system is to secure that data. And if you've got other parts of the business in there without any kind of controls on them, then that's not securing the data. So what I generally say is apply it to everyone, but scrutinize the in-scope systems, people, and processes, because they're the ones that are going to be audited. And you can expand the scope. You can do a scope expansion audit where, say you start with help desk services, and then there's a need where, your professional services division, there's a customer or a contract that says we need that part to be on your certificate. Then you can come and you can pay for a scope expansion audit where they'll audit the delta, right? So the things that you're adding on, they'll audit that, and then you can get your certificate updated with the broader scope, and then that will just be brought in as the normal maintenance of it. So it's flexible. Just don't try and bite off more you can chew at the start, because it takes a while to get into the rhythm of it, change it, getting the business to understand it, and then you can grow from there as needs arise. So
no, that's not. Thanks so much for that. So tell me about your real life example, because you spoke a lot about how you can generate revenue, how you can build showcase as a differentiated MSP in the MSP space. Tell me about your real life story. How was your experience with implementing ISO, and how did you guys generate additional revenue, or how did you guys build a better MSP when you guys implemented ISO at your MSP?
Yeah, so my background and my journey with doing this, I'm doing implementations for MSPs now, but when we first went through that process and we're very new at it, I guess the first thing is we got a contractor in, like you normally do, because we didn't know much about it. We know the technical side, like a lot of the technical controls, MFA and logging and password, but like that's not a problem for an MSP compared to other businesses that do it. But when it comes down to process and procedure, MSPs struggle, right? It's very hard to get that running and in place in the kind of environment we're in. So we've got a contractor in, and they were great. They were amazing. What I did find though is they didn't quite understand the nuances of an MSP, the business model and how we're set up. MSPs are generally 80% techs. That's where the bulk of the business is, and a lot of these controls try and limit administration, right, and try and control techs. So it's hard to implement a lot of the stuff and the policies when you've got guys who need to go out on site to customers and connect to routers and not be blocked from, putting on a piece of software they might need to do to help a customer who's down or something like that. They don't need to be, filling out all these forms and trying to get that installed or allowed. So we found that with the nuances of the MSP and the consultant, it just took a long time for us to get through it. And get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. The other thing is we didn't commit enough resources at the start. We thought it was something we could just do on the side of everything else. We got the leadership team involved, and a couple of them go, let's go out and do this thing. And we quickly found that, everything else is a priority, right? Customer calls, you go off and do that. You're not doing this. 100%. And it's one of those things, right? You get some momentum and you stop, and then you got to catch up because it's continuous. The framework is around continuously improving the system. So if you stop, there's a big jump to get back into it. So that was another thing we found is we didn't commit enough resources initially. We got to the point where it was dragging on too long. I think we're at 12 months and we hadn't really got that far. We hadn't even been through the stage 1 order or anything like that. And we're like, okay, let's actually do this. Let's put some time limits on it. Let's tell these people you're 50% working on this and make sure it's working. And that has to come from the top, right? The owner, generally, or the leadership team needs to commit that and protect those resources who are doing it and make sure they don't get dragged into the BAU work or anything like that as much as you can. So once we got the certification process, we got our certificate, which was great. We found our business ran a lot better. We just did all the things that we thought we did, just organically, but having them written down and followed and reviewed and checked helped catch out a whole lot of little things we were doing wrong, even with the onboarding and offboarding of our own staff, leaving admins in certain portals and things like that. It just really helped that process, and it helped us have better conversations with clients because we were going through it. We go out on site and then we notice something to do with their physical security, something to do with their onboarding and offboarding of users, their training of users, or even the sales guys, right, going out on site and starting to speak a bit more, not just about cybersecurity, which everyone in the MSP world's been talking about for the last 7 or 8 years, which is great. And starting to have that high conversation of it's not just technical AV, firewalls, all that kind of thing. This is compliance as well. So actually building the business processes to go along with that and building awareness for users on, identifying breaches and things like that. So it helped us, become a much more mature business is a good way to put it, I think. It helped with questionnaires from clients and from vendors when they were asking us how we manage our security. We already had it in place. We had all the policies. We could just send them a policy pack and go, here you go. This is what we do. And from the revenue stream side of things is once we understood what was required in it, we started to align our MSP services, right? So our monthly contracts. So we could start to say things like on our gold package, you meet these 15 controls in ISO 27701 just by being on our contract. And that helps with marketing, right? Not paying any more, you're not charging anyone. You just have the knowledge of what in your current stack aligns with ISO, and you can have those conversations with clients. Well, you already get this, and we can start to look at, projects or professional engagements, vCISO services, things like that you can kind of tack on and actually have that background knowledge within the business rather than looking at external consultants or third-party vendors or anything like that to come in or assist you with that. It also helped with our business strategy. We had to maintain that ISO standard. It puts certain things to light around making sure we don't just go out and buy 40,000 different tools every time we go to a conference. We've got to be a bit more picky about what the vendors are. How are they protecting our data and our customers? Just so we could make better decisions, more streamlined decisions as well. So the big thing was learning it so we could bring it on to customers and show in our contracts or with projects or extra services how we could help them align more so they could look at achieving it if they wanted to, or even if they don't. It's a little marketing tick box, right? Really, you're already getting this for your current contract.
Correct.
So that was the way that we found to kind of put that.
No, absolutely. Just by the sound of it, just sounds more mature. And more professional. So, even if it's marketing, then it definitely works. Certainly piqued my interest when you just spoke about how it can help meet ISO compliance without even having to worry about external auditor. So, which is pretty awesome. So, no, thanks so much for sharing that real life example. So, tell me realistically, what's the cost, time, and effort needed by an MSP to achieve that ISO certification?
This is one of the tougher questions, right? It depends, as the diplomatic answer is. It depends on the size, the scope of what you're including in your certification. There's also a formula that the certification bodies use when they calculate their costs. So the hard costs that you need to definitely do is, firstly, I would say it's mandatory to buy the standards. So the actual ISO standards document, you can't just obtain freely. It's a licensed document. You need to buy that from ISO. And look, that's $300 or $400 to buy that. And that just outlines the framework. It doesn't give you much guidance or help. It just tells you what they want out of it, right? So I'd encourage everyone to start with just purchasing that just to get an idea of what's in there. Look, you can go on Google and you can search and you can find fragments, but you'd be very hard to find the actual document written out in the way that the auditors do it, because it is a licensed document. And then you've got the actual certification body, the external third party, which you need. Look, generally for the stage 1 and 2 audits, you would want to budget 10 to 15K for that initial 2 audits. And then the surveillance audits, as they're kind of a cut down smaller one, you're probably at 5 to 10 per year to maintain that. And then the third year comes around, it's not quite as high as the first one because it's kind of 1 and 2. You're probably looking at more of that 8 to 10 kind of there. And that's just the external help, right? If you go down having a consultant, then there's obviously consultant costs in there, but it's not a necessity. You don't have to get a consultant at all. And there's obviously different levels of engagement there. You can have them do a lot of it. You can just have them be on the side. You can do that there. From a time commitment perspective, from resources internally, what we found around a 50-seat MSP was having, one person nearly fully dedicated, probably 80% of their time on running and maintaining the system, and then having the leadership team, or what they call a steering committee, in there, probably 30% of their time, roughly around that, helping maintain it, because it's a lot of ongoing work that if you don't do it, the audits become very hard, because you cram like in uni, right? Like the night before your exam, you're doing all the work 4 hours before the exam starts. It's very hard, and you don't get the benefits of it. You're not doing anything throughout the year, and then you're doing it last minute, and you may get through, but it's not the spirit and what you should be doing to get the benefits of it. You're just getting a tick box at that point. So there is a fair bit of resources, but it can get easier as you get into that maintenance stage. You can start to delegate a lot of the stuff at that point, as the individuals within the business and the staff and things become more accustomed to it. You can start to delegate out certain things, certain checks, certain evidence collections you got to do. There's a few mandatory meetings which happen, but you can push them out to quarterly. There's a few things you can do to lower that. But initially, it's pretty intense to get the certification, because there's a lot of change that happens, right? A lot of new policies implemented. People have to read it. People have to sign off on it. You need to adjust what you're doing to meet those policies. There's 93 controls that they want you to implement with that. You may have some in place, you may not, so there may be a bit of work there. But each time you implement something, right, there's a change somewhere. Someone has to do something differently with their day. You need to document something. So it can be pretty intense. But it's an investment, right? Once you get there, it's a maintenance cycle and continuous improvement. So, I mentioned the numbers around the external auditor. Consultant, if you want to use them, there's a cost of that. But internally, probably 1.5 FTEs or something like that is probably a good starting point. But you'll find at the start you may need to dump a lot more in to get there. It depends where you're starting, though, right? That gap assessment can help. How far are you away? If you're really far, then you need more resources. If you're not that far, you're pretty mature, you're relying to other frameworks already. It might not be that far. It might just be a few documentation updates, and you might be pretty good. So. Again, bouncing around the question, there isn't a great answer for it, unfortunately. There's not a hard fix. So.
It depends on how mature you are as an organization, I guess.
Correct.
But that's a significant amount of effort, and especially with the SMB MSPs that we guys are talking about today. I mean, how would you justify an ROI based on such an amount of cost and effort that goes into it, and even if you can justify that MSP, how you could justify that ROI, and why should MSPs consider that ISO certification still?
So I mentioned probably a lot of ROIs already, but it's going to be lowering your risk, the business itself, the MSPs itself's risk, and maturing the business. So there's less chance of interruptions and downtime and 100%. Breaches. All them cost the MSP money, even if they're not hard dollars money. They're time and resources and reputation damage that can be done there. It opens up those other revenue streams that I kind of mentioned. It allows you to go for tenders or contracts that maybe you wouldn't be up for before, or maybe put you ahead of other competitors when you're tendering for those, right? Like if there's 5 MSPs going for it and only 1 or 2 or no others have the ISO certification, that's something you can really call out in those tenders and try and really push that home, because businesses do care. It's going to help you align with any legal and regulatory changes, because a part of it is, looking at the contracts. So MSPs don't know, a lot of the contracts you sign with vendors have clauses in them around you having to notify certain vendors when you get breached and things like that. And if you don't do that, then, there could be a financial hit on that, a legal hit. So it forces you to look at your contracts, make sure you're meeting all the obligations and all the legislation as well. Like, there's talks at the moment about the Privacy Act they've gone through a review, and they're going to look at implementing some of that. And the big one for a lot of MSPs is, and their customers is, it used to be a 3 million turnover kind of turning point where you didn't apply. If you were under 3 million turnover, you didn't have the Privacy Act really apply to you. If you're over, you did. Now they're looking at scrapping that. So every business will be under the Privacy Act, along with a whole lot of other kind of refinements and reforms as well. So it's going to help you stay on top of that, because it forces you to constantly review and keep up to date with those kind of legislation changes. Yeah, there's a whole lot there that you can come back on. I could talk probably for hours
No, I think you've
about
done.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I think you've done a pretty good information about generating new revenue streams and just about risk and compliance. I mean, that's huge. That as an external vendor, uh, you know, I would definitely look at organizations so that can reduce the risk for the organization. So that's pretty huge in itself. So what is the first step that you think we get our clients or MSP clients can take today to start their ISO certification journey? And if they decide to take up the journey, how can you help the MSPs in the process?
yeah. First step I would say is look at the standard. Buy the standards document from ISO. I think it's iso.org. You can search that pretty easily. But buy the standard. Have a look at what's actually written in it and the kinds of things you need to comply with. The other thing is look at, is there a reason you want to get this? Like, I would love for every MSP to go out and just
Mhm.
get ISO certified. But look, there's a lot of MSPs where it wouldn't show for the investment you need to put in. There's probably not, at least at this stage, a reason to do it. So don't go wasting or spending the money. You could just use the standard that you've bought for a couple $100 and just start to align your processes. You don't have to go through the certification. You can just start to, as you're growing your business, just start to dot the I's, cross the T's on the things that are in standard. So if one day you do want to, or something comes in where you need to align to something, you're not as far away as you thought rather than just completely ignoring it. So there's that. Like, if there's no real contractual benefit, there isn't clients out there that are asking for it. There isn't tenders you can go for where you can increase that. You're pretty small. You don't have to. You can get it when you're small. So I'm not saying if you're small, don't look at this at all. You definitely can. But it's going to be you need to do it like an ROI on yourself, right? Like, what are we going to
Yeah.
get out of this from that investment? Or is it something we're future proofing ourselves? We're not going to get a direct ROI right now, other than the internal business benefits and things like that. But down the track,
Yeah.
we're looking at doing this. So I would definitely start with the standard, start aligning things, doing what you can yourself within your
Yeah.
own business. That's the easiest and cheapest way, right?
Yeah.
To do that. So that's the very first thing I do. Then, as a 1.1 step, do a gap analysis, right? Either
Mhm.
look at trying to do it yourself, go through the standard, look at what you're doing now, see if you can work out the gaps and what you need to do there, or get a consultant in to come and
Mhm.
do just the initial assessment. It might cost you a couple of grand, but you'll have that kind of plan on, here's where we are now, here's where the standard wants us to be, and it can give you a whole lot of actions out of that. And again, you could start working on them yourself without any extra help, just within your own business. Get a few resources together, get a couple of hours a week, just start running through the list and getting things in place. So one day it becomes easier, or down the track when you want to go and actually get
Mhm.
certified, it's a smaller leap to get across there.
Yeah.
I guess where I can help is in any way an MSP needs. Generally, I'd recommend that we engage with a gap analysis, so we
Yeah.
can work out where you are, where you need to get to, and then my involvement can be as little or as much as you want. I could be on the sidelines with questions and things. I could develop the policies and things for you, get all that documentation stuff out of the way, because generally the tech side, the MSP is fine with, right? They've got all the
Yeah.
techs and things like that. I generally don't want to get into touching people's systems. That's not really what I want to do these days, but I've got a technology background. I can definitely assist and a guide with how to implement those technical controls to meet the standard in there. It could be a high engagement where, majority of the documentation and running all the meetings and all the cadences and that kind of thing I could do, or I could help train internal resources as well.
Hmm.
I'm also a certified trainer in ISO implementation as well, so I can help with
That's perfect.
even uplifting your staff to be able to manage it better themselves as well. So you don't need to fully invest in a consultant. You can do a lot of it yourself if you want to go that way as well. And I'm happy to help. So
Yeah. Fair enough. So get the help as and when it's required rather than having a full-time implementer on board.
MSP is a time poor, right? It's like sometimes you got to
100%.
build it or buy it. So you got to make that choice.
Yeah.
What you want to do there. Look, a lot of the time, what I find with MSPs is initially they need a bit of help to get across the line, but once they get
Yeah.
into the rhythm and understand it, you can scale that right back to a more of a minimal engagement where you're just keeping like, things ticking along. You ask questions because you've got to continuously improve it and do risk assessment and things. So, you have that consultant on the side where, they're available to you a couple of hours a month or something like that. So you can bounce the questions and they can do a bit of the documentation stuff for you, make sure you're in line. So when the audit comes, you're ready to go. And again, in the audit, I can be involved in the audit as little or much as you want. Generally, what I find is the first audits, it's good to be involved to help guide where things are, what the auditor's asking. Because the auditors, right, they're all different. You could get one on a good day, you could get one on a bad day. Things you do for one customer that works and gets through certified, sometimes an auditor will pick and pull at it. And they're not there to catch you out or to try and, find holes in it. They're there just to make sure that you're meeting the standard, right? But they will call out things that they don't find. And look, sometimes they try and find at least a couple of things, right? Like their job is to look through your system and pick out holes, and no one's perfect. There's no one ever that meets 100% of the standard constant all the time, right? And it's always changing and improving. So generally being involved in those audits is good, but then subsequent audits, you find a lot of the time the MSPs can handle it themselves without the consultant needing to be involved in a lot of those subsequent ones as well. They generally get the gist of it. They're in a rhythm. They've got plans. They've got procedures in place. And it kind of, runs itself nearly from that point on. Yeah.
No, fair enough. No, that gives a good brief about how you could help as well. Now, thanks so much for that, Clinton. Thanks for sharing all that information. I think that gives us a bit of an idea about how our clients, our MSP clients, can help kickstart the journey and how it could help differentiate them in this ever competitive MSP market space and ever so busy. It's even getting busier. So yeah, it's good to have all that information. And we guys can probably come back to you with some questions as well. I don't think so we guys have enough time to take questions at this moment, but I think what we guys can do is we guys can capture questions, we guys can communicate with people who've attended the session and come back, or they could share the questions with us and we guys can probably engage Clinton or help or request Clinton to answer those questions for you guys. And hopefully you find this session useful about ISO and how ISO certification can help. Is there anything else that you want to add that could benefit MSP clients and candidates with the experience that you have, Clinton?
I guess it's just take notice of this stuff, right? We've been through the booms of cloud was big at one stage. Everyone was going to Azure and AWS, and that was the buzz. We've moved across to cybersecurity, which is very important and still a buzz. But I think people are starting to get tired of cybersecurity being mentioned all the time. And I think the next thing is governance, right? It's going to be over the top of that cybersecurity. So not just the technology that people are doing, their stack, their AV, more around the policies and procedures and uplifting those businesses and securing the actual information that they hold, because the information is the value to anyone, right? The servers, the hardware, the things that you buy don't mean anything. It's the data that has all that value. So we need to be looking at protecting that. And clients are going to want it at some stage. I'm just urge MSPs to look at something. Doesn't need to be ISO. Start with Essential 8, look at other frameworks, things like that, but start to take notice of governance, because I think it's going to be coming. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's going to be the next big thing from what I'm seeing in industry events and things like that. It's becoming a lot more of a topic beyond cybersecurity. I think we're starting to evolve out of that.
Oh, 100%. 100% agree with you. Having experience working with MSPs, not many were talking about Essential 8s a couple of years ago, but it's a constant discussion at this moment, and especially around compliance and stuff as well, like ISOs. We weren't discussing ISOs a lot a couple of years ago, but now we guys are a lot with respect to what it could mean for our customers. So 100%, compliance is becoming a big thing. In fact, I would also request you for a follow-up as well, because a lot of MSPs also help deliver custom software as well to their clients. A lot of our clients are software firms as well. So I would like to have a conversation with you also about how ISO could help, or why is ISO important in that software development kind of arena as well. But obviously, we guys don't have time at this moment, but we guys can take a follow-up session on that one as well. So yeah, that gives us a topic. Cool.
Sure. There's actually a whole section on software development in the ISO standard as well. So it's not comprehensive, but they do touch on, if you develop software, there is some controls and things they want you to put in place. So it is accounted for within the standard. So.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, and I'm assuming it would also touch about how you can how there are compliances or other standards that you can mean to ensure data security and data privacy within that software design and architecture as well. I'm assuming so.
Yeah, it forces you to look at what contractual and legislation obligations you have. So if you're in Europe, you'd have GDPR. You would have to integrate that into your ISO, because it forces you to go out and look at what obligations you have. So if you've got other ones specific to the industry that you're in, I know the finance industry has as a standard CPS, I think it is 224 something out there. If you're dealing with government, they might be under the ISM, the Information Security Manual. They may have contractual requirements to meet the Essential 8, and maybe you do too. So the ISO standard, if it's not directly ISO related, it kind of helps you identify other things that you need to meet and bring that into the system as well. So it can help with that side of things. Yeah.
Ah, perfect. I think a lot of our clients that specifically deal around healthcare, finance sector, medical sector, government. A lot of MSPs that deal in this particular sector, or education itself. A lot of MSPs that deal in that space. They talk a lot about these kind of compliance or sector related compliance as well. So yeah, that's going to be awesome to speak about as well. Now, great. Now, thanks so much for that, Clinton. I really appreciate you taking out an hour to speak to us and sharing all the information. It was awesome, learning about all of this information from you. So that's pretty awesome. Thanks so much for that, Clinton.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me. Just happy to try and spread the word.
Yeah, happy to help. Yeah, awesome. Done. We'll come back to you for any questions that our audience will share, and then we guys can have a follow-up session as well to address any questions. Cool.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Awesome. Done. Thanks so much for that, Clinton.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
See you.
Have a great day. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.